why don't I take you on a tour of my permaculture garden? This is where I apply and learn permaculture. As you can see, it's not a very ordered looking space. It looks a little bit chaotic. That's because if you look at nature, natural systems are like this. In fact, in permaculture, we say that very ordered spaces are actually chaotic because it takes a lot of effort to keep things like that. That's not how nature likes to move. And I have a combination of garden space where things are growing in the ground, as well as also container gardening. These containers allow me to expand my growing area while also um, uh, there's the flexibility of being able to move elements in containers as needed based on the season. There we saw I was growing some kakri. Here we have some aubergine flowers right now, and hopefully fruit in some time. Um, so one feature of a permaculture garden would be that you'll see a lot of um, polyculture. So it's not monoculture, it's not one thing, it's several things growing side by side. And it could be companion planting, and but generally most plants are okay next to each other. There's only a few plants which repel each other, and the advantage of having um, many different plants together is that it's a natural pest deterrent, and also the benefits of one which can be utilized by another. So one thing we do is what we call multi-story planting, and here in the corner you can see that we have lemon which is growing in the shade of a jasmine shrub, bale or vine, and in the same shade we also have here lemongrass and a chili plant. That's because these plants require partial shade because we have a very strong sun. I mean, these days we have nice weather, but generally we have a very strong sun in the summer. And then we also do multi-story planting in the sense that in the corner I have another kakri or Armenian cucumber vine, which I'm using the permanent vine, which is the jasmine vine, as a trellis for it. So an important aspect also of this multi-story planting and growing in permaculture is that uh, we think of everything as an element in our garden space, and each element has many functions, and we try it for each element to have more than one function. So for example, this vine, the jasmine vine, is not just pretty and fragrant, but it also serves as a trellis and shade. So it's providing several different functions in the garden, and we that way we try to think of maximizing the number of relationships each element has in our garden. So here we're going to walk into the main garden space, which is about a 25 by 25 foot square area. Here you will see it's an explosion of different kinds of green and shapes and shades and sizes. There's a lot of periwinkle which has taken over, or Sadabahar is the Urdu name. I let it be in the summer because it keeps the soil cool with its shade, and it's a burst of color. Very few things grow in the open sun in Karachi. Here in the shade of a falsa pot, I have asparagus growing, which is in its second year. It's doing quite well. Asparagus is a root vegetable, root herb. Here I have planted several papaya trees as well, and the purpose, again from a multi-story point of view, is that it will provide shade some shade, and then in Karachi with dengue, someone or the other is always asking for papaya leaves, so it's good to have papaya in our homes. We used to grow a lot of it, we don't anymore. You can see I've also let bajra be. The advantage of bajra is that it attracts birds to your garden, and when birds come, they also leave behind free fertilizer for your garden, so they help improve the quality of soil. So it's for me, it's not a nuisance at all, but rather something to attract more wildlife into our garden and encourage uh, animal biodiversity as well, in addition to just the plant. So something else which I've been using for several years now is a technique, an old African technique actually. It's called pitcher or matka irrigation over here, and this is especially useful for arid zones, and Karachi is an arid zone where there's scarcity of water. So the idea is to put an unglazed pot into the ground and fill it with water, and that way plants are fed water in the subsoil, and you reduce chances of evaporation this way. This I found to be quite effective. So like this pitcher or matka over here, I have several buried throughout the garden, and many of these papaya trees are growing next to a pitcher. Here's another example of multi-story growth. We have same khali, a bean vine growing on top of the papaya tree, and below that is one of my favorite places in the garden, which is my observation bench. This is a log where I sit and I observe and see what's happening in the garden, and I observe the seasons, and this is where I absorb and learn and see what's happening. Observation is a very, very key part of permaculture design, and it's our first place of where we inform ourselves. Here's a chiku tree in the corner. We try to have a combination of both perennial plants as well as seasonal plants, and below that, for the sake of soil, I also have a worm compost bin. There's worm compost in here and composting worms working away. So this I keep cool in the shade of the chiku tree, and I use the compost as well as compost tea for the plants. This is over here the view from my observation bench. Also my favorite place to sit and have a cup of tea. Bougainvillea is a great burst of color for Karachi. Does well with little water and makes a great hedge as well. And so I have a lot of bougainvillea growing, and in this bougainvillea I recently discovered honeybees have also just started to build a hive, which is nice to know that my garden they consider a safe space to build a home for themselves. This is another edible. Here we have curry patta growing as well. So this is curry patta and papita and lobia, all of that growing in the same, next to the same pitcher, in the same area. Under the shade of these I have some herbs. There's basil. Basil is fairly hardy, doesn't need so much shade, but rosemary I've had throughout summer, it survived. There's rosemary over here, and mint as well, which you can't see in this picture. Here is another variety of sweet potato. I have yet to try this variety, but it's another pretty ground cover. It looks nice, and that's also next to a pitcher, and this next to the same pitcher is this baby banana plant that's growing. And there's a lot of this wild weed with a beautiful lavender colored flower, which has also taken over the garden along with the periwinkle. So here, this gives you an idea of what the garden floor looks like, and it's, if you've been to a forest, you'll notice that it's like a forest floor in the sense that the leaf litter that falls to the ground just dries on the ground and over time becomes soil. So all of this obviously is not from the plants here, but I collect leaves wherever I can, and then I add them as mulch to my garden soil. Ideally, garden soil should be covered, and uh, and a good quality soil will feel soft as you walk on it. It's not compacted. It's a bit spongy. It retains moisture, uh, and this you can see over here over time. This soil under the leaf litter. This is the quality of it, and it wasn't always like this. It used to be fairly sandy, and it's just continuing to improve. Um, so these are very important aspects. I think they're the bedrock on which one can have a garden, which are soil and water. We all know that water is quite scarce in Karachi. We need to be as mindful of our use of it as possible and not to waste any drop where we can. Um, the soil quality, of course, the better quality soil we have, the more productive our garden is going to be. So for a visitor, what might be most striking about my permaculture garden would be that it looks a little bit untamed, it looks a little wild, the floor looks a little bit like a forest floor. There's a lot of different things happening all over. Things are growing, a variety of things are growing together. There's diversity, there's intentional diversity, and unintentional as well, where things grow by themselves, which is welcomed. Um, and they'll notice there's a lot of different kinds of birds that come if they stay long enough, that come to the garden. They're bee eaters, they're honeybees as well, different kinds of bees. There are sunbirds which come uh, when there's sunflowers. There's also parrots which come. I've also seen a kingfisher, um, even an owl. There were shrews in the garden at one point, and I think an owl was looking to hunt them. So there's a great variety, and it's a living garden, and there's a sense of being in nature. So this garden for me is also like nature therapy, to sit in it and and just be amazed by how it is that quite by itself nature, um, if you let it be, has so much abundance to share with you, and so much joy to bring to you, and it's such a delight.